Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Stephanie Armstrong, and I'm a lecturer here at the University of Lincoln in the School of Health and Social Care. And one of the things that I teach is anatomy and physiology. So what we're going to do today is have a look at some of the organs that we have in our bodies, and we're going to start off by having a look at our heart. So we're going to have a look at our heart, and we're going to do a bit of a dissection so that we can see what our hearts look like inside our bodies. So I'm going to bring the heart into the screen now so that you can see what it looks like. This is a lamb's heart, so it's come from a sheep. So it's a little bit smaller than you would expect from a human heart. So a human heart is a bit bigger than this, and on average, the human heart is about the size of our clenched fist. So if you clench your fist up, that's about the size of your heart inside your chest. So the heart is a large muscular organ within the body. And you may know from science classes that it's made up of 4 chambers. And when we look at the heart sitting here in front of us, this side of the heart on this side is actually the left side of the heart, and this side of the heart is the right side of the heart. And you can see that on the surface of the heart, these pale bits are fatty deposits. So they're all over the surface of the heart, and that's completely normal. That's what hearts look like all the time. One thing I should say is that as we're going along, please do feel free to ask some questions. If you want to ask me anything, just please pop it into the comments, and I'll try and keep up with those as we go along. So back to our heart here then. So you can see that it's got these fatty deposits, and that's normal. All hearts have some fat around the outside of them. It's there to help protect the heart. And you can also just make out here, there's a kind of a ridge along the midline here, which is actually the coronary artery. So this is where the coronary artery goes, which is a blood vessel that supplies the blood supply to the heart itself. So it's part of our circulatory system, and it's there to help supply all the nutrients and the oxygen through the blood supply to the heart muscle itself, because the heart, like any of our muscles around the body, needs to have plenty of oxygen and plenty of nutrients in order to help it to work. So we think about what an amazing job our heart does. Our heart sits in our chest, and from the moment we're born, it's beating away, pumping that blood around our bodies. In an adult human, the average heart rate is around about 60 beats per minute. So if you think about that, that's 1 beat per second, all day long, every day. That changes though quite a bit. So when we're exercising, as soon as we start walking, our heart rate will increase a bit. Or if we start running, it'll increase quite a lot. If we sit down, or if we go to bed and lie down, our heart rate drops a little bit. But on average, the resting heart rate is around about 60 beats per minute. So have a bit more of a look at our heart. So if we pick it up, we can see that there's these little flaps of muscle that are there to help hold the heart in place. And I'm going to just turn it over. On this one, you can see the top bits of the heart have been already cut away, and this leads into the atria. So these are the top chambers of the heart, and you can see down inside those chambers already, because the top part of the heart has been cut away, and you can see how big those chambers are. Each of the 4 chambers of the heart are actually equal in size, so they're all the same size. So although when we look at the heart this way around again, this side of the heart looks a bit smaller than this side of the heart, and I'll explain a bit why that is in a minute. But actually the bits inside the heart, all of those chambers inside the heart, are all exactly the same size. So they all hold the same amount of blood when it's getting ready to pump that blood around. If we have a look at the top here then, we can see that there are some big tubes, and these big tubes are the blood vessels that lead into the heart, and you can see how big they are. So this is quite a small heart, but this vessel here, I can get my finger right down inside there, Actually, if I push my finger right the way down, I can feel right the way down into the chamber that it empties into. And this one goes into the left ventricle, so it goes into the left-hand side or the bottom of the heart. This one here, again, similarly, quite a big one. This one, and you can actually just see my finger coming through into the right atrium, so it goes into that bottom right bit. So those are some really big blood vessels. So this one here, which is going into that right atrium up here, that one is our superior vena cava. So that's the main blood vessel that brings the blood from all around our body back to our heart down here. This one here, this really big one, is the one that's going out of our heart. So it's going out of our left ventricle, and this is our aorta. It's our main artery that pumps all that blood around our body. So these are really big blood vessels. There are some other smaller blood vessels that also go into and out of the heart, and they're a little bit more difficult to see on this one because they're quite small. But once we've dissected the heart, we'll be able to see those a little bit more clearly. So the heart, the right side of the heart, so this side of the heart here, is a little bit smaller, and like I say, there's a big blood vessel coming in here into the top part of the heart here. That then pushes the blood through into the bottom part, which then pushes the blood back up to the lungs. So all of the blood that's coming into this side of the heart is our deoxygenated blood. It's the blood that's come from the outside of the body, not the outside of the body, from the body back to the heart, ready to go back to the lungs where it's going to pick up that oxygen. So then the left side of the heart carries all of the oxygenated blood, which comes back into the left atrium, moves down into the left ventricle, which is then pushed out all around the body to take all of that good oxygen that the muscles and all of the body organs need back around the heart. So let's have a look inside. Let's open it up and have a little look inside. So the heart muscle is quite tough and quite thick. So we're going to cut a line down through this thick muscle, so that we can see inside. So you can see. I'm just going to use my scissors here just to snip up this bit. Cut up through the top bit a little bit. So we can now see inside the left-hand side of our heart. So if I move that out of the way a little bit so that we can see on the camera, you can see here, this is one wall of the heart here. This is the other side on this side, and you can see just how thick that muscle is. So a really thick layer of muscle on this left-hand side. When we look down inside then, we can see some of the internal bits. So the ventricle is this bottom bit down here, and here you'll see these white stringy bits that are going through. These are the chordae tendineae, or the heart cords. They're tendons inside the heart that help to move the flaps of the bicuspid valve up here. So the bicuspid valve here has been a little bit damaged by when the heart was taken out, but you can see that there's a membrane here, so with my finger underneath it, and that membrane is the valve between those two chambers. So it's a really important valve, helps to make sure that the blood moves through those chambers, helps separate the chambers, allowing those muscles to really push and pump that blood back out of the heart. So like I say, there's these tendons here. These tendons are incredibly strong, and they move those flaps and help hold them in place. So you can see how thick those muscle walls are and how much work that heart does to pump that blood. If we have a look at the other side of the heart then, so the right hand side, again we'll just cut through that muscle down into it, and you can see that cutting through this muscle was a little bit easier. So it's not quite as thick when you cut down through. So again, and you can see that layer there. This is the wall. So if we compare this wall here, this is the right atrium and the right ventricle. Actually, the right atrium is up here and the right ventricle is down here. And you can see how much thinner this muscle is here compared to this muscle here. So it's much different size, much thinner on this side compared to this side, which is really, really thick. And this is because this side doesn't need to work quite as hard as the left-hand side. So the right-hand side of the heart, pumping that blood from the heart, the blood comes back into the top of the heart from the body. It then pushes down into the ventricle below. That builds up the pressure. The ventricle then is able to contract and pump and pushes the blood back up to the lungs. So it only has to go quite a short space, because the lungs, if you think about where the heart and the lungs sit within the chest, they're very close together. So it only has to get that blood to pump just a little bit from the heart up to the lungs. Whereas this side, the left side, with this big muscular, thick muscular wall, has to pump from this little heart all the way around the whole body, right the way down to the feet, right the way up to the head. So around the whole of the body. So it's got a much thicker piece of muscle. It's much thicker, so that it can use all of that muscular force to push that blood up around the body. So again, if we look in here, we can see the inside of the ventricle here. And again, there's some muscle and things going across there with the tendons inside. And you've got the valve up above that would separate the two chambers. And we can go back and think about, where is this coming out? So the ventricle here is pushing out through here. The vessel's been removed, but the vessel would come up through here. And again, on this side, the vessel would come up through and out into the outside of the heart as well, off around the body. So that will come out just up here. So that's what the inside of the heart looks like. It's a very amazing organ. If we think about the vessels then that are coming through, we have the aorta, which is that main artery going out around. And think about some of the differences between our blood vessels while we're having a look at the heart. The arteries have all got valves in. So we saw the valve here. This is the valve within the heart. Within those arteries, there's similar valves all through those. Through the veins rather, and the veins have those valves in to help make the blood go in one direction. So it's really important, all of the valves within the heart and within the blood vessels all ensure that the blood continues circulating in just that one direction. We don't want the blood going back on itself. We want it to continuously circulate around our body or between the lungs and the heart, always going in one direction. And so those valves are really important to ensure that happens. And in our blood vessels, that they help with that as well, to ensure that the blood gets back to the heart where it needs to be, and then pumped off into the other bits of the body or off to the lungs, wherever it needs to go to. And then again, we can see, if we look at the back side of the heart, you can again see these blood vessels that are associated with all of those different bits of the heart itself. So all of these blood vessels, they go across all of the heart, ensuring that the heart itself has got a nice supply of blood and nutrients that it needs. So that's our look at the heart. I always find it really fascinating, the difference between this side of the heart and this side of the heart. So it's so much difference, the thickness of the left side of the heart compared to the not so thick side of the right side of the heart. And it's very similar to the muscles that we have in our skeleton, but it's just a slightly different arrangement to allow it to have that continuous beating of the heart. So that's our heart in a nutshell. That's our heart dissection. So I do also have something else for us to have a look at today. So what I'm going to do is just swap over my boards, because I also have a set of lungs to have a look at. So we know that the heart and the lungs work really closely together. So I'm just going to swap over the boards, and I'm going to bring in the set of lungs. So the set of lungs is quite big, so just so that you're aware, there's going to be a big set of lungs coming into your view now. So here we go, here is the set of our lungs. So this is the lungs. So the lungs sit within the chest cavity as well. And you can see this is quite a large set of lungs. I'll just move them around a little bit so you can see them a bit better. And they are quite big. So even within our own bodies, they'll be quite large. And they have space for the heart to sit. And you can see here there's various blood vessels and organs associated with them as well. So these lungs are quite dark coloured because they've not got any oxygen inside them at the moment. You can see as I'm pressing on them, they're quite soft. So they are quite soft to touch. And you can also see that it's made up of different lobes, different areas within the lungs itself. So you've got various lobes of the lungs. And the lungs are where we have the interface with the gases that we breathe in and out. So we breathe in, and the alveoli, which are the small sacs at the end of all of the bronchioles within the lungs, take the oxygen part, which is the bit that we want, out of the air that we breathe, and at the same time, the carbon dioxide, which is a bit of a waste product within the body, is expelled, it's breathed out through the same tube back into the outside again. And that all takes place within each of these areas on the lungs. So before I actually do any kind of dissection into these lungs, I'm going to have a little go and see if I can get these lungs to inflate a little bit. So hopefully we'll be able to see some inflation in the lungs. There is a little bit of damage on these lungs, so there may be areas that don't inflate, but what I'm hoping is I'm going to be able to get them to actually inflate a little bit for you. And then what I'll do is I will run through and show you all the various different bits of the lungs as well. So what I'm going to do is I've got a bicycle pump here, and I'm just going to, it's a little bit fiddly to get it to go in. I'm just going to get the bicycle tube to go into the trachea. I need to be a little bit careful because I need to make sure that I get it to go into the trachea, into the air tube. Just bear with me a second. There we go. So that's now slid inside into the trachea, and so the bicycle pump is there. So now hopefully when I push some air in, hopefully we'll start to see some movement in the lungs. So hopefully you can see it there down on that bottom edge down here. You can see the lungs going in and out. So this is as if it's breathing. So there you go, breathing in, breathing out. So you can see those lungs moving in and out with the air. And if I keep doing that, it's a little bit hard to see because these ones are not expanding fully. So as I do that, the more that I do that, I'm not sure how clearly it shows on the camera, but as I do that, the colour of the lungs changes a little bit as the oxygen goes into those lungs. But we can see them moving in and out. And that's what happens when we breathe, is that all these little air sacs down here fill up with air as we're breathing. So I inserted that tube into the end of the trachea. So this is the end of the trachea here. And you can see the inside of the trachea is just here. So this is where the tube went into. And this is a joint area where you've got that's the joint area where you've got both the esophagus, which is the pipe that takes food away, and the trachea. So this is that joint larynx area at the top of the trachea. If I just turn this around a little bit, you can see here, you can see there's a series of different tubes. So you've got the esophagus, which is the tube that takes your food away, and you've got the trachea here, which is this ridged tube that you can see. I'll just move this over a little bit more just so that you can see that a little bit better on the camera. If the sheep was a heavy smoker, what changes would you expect to see in the lungs? That's a really good question. So with the lungs, so if this sheep had been a heavy smoker, you would expect to see quite a few dark patches within the lungs. The lungs themselves wouldn't be as soft. So these are a little bit rigid because they've actually been frozen and then defrosted. So and when they're inside the chest cavity, there's a lot more moisture around them as well, which makes them a little bit more pliable. But you would expect to see darkening. They'd be much darker in colour. These ones aren't too bad. Normally they would be a good healthy set of lungs would be a little bit paler than this. I think in textbooks, most textbooks would describe it as being a salmon pink colour. So it's that kind of real pinky, sort of smoked salmon pinky colour. Is what you should see. So these ones are a little bit darker than that, but that's purely because they haven't had any oxygen inside them. If you were to then, I'm going to open these up in a minute to have a look at the inside, and if you have a look at the inside, if our sheep had been a bit naughty and been smoking a lot, you would then see some changes to the shape of the alveoli and the bits inside, and you'd actually start to see some gaps appearing where there shouldn't be gaps, and darkening of all of that tissue where the smoke has actually been inhaled and darken the tissue. So if you think about sort of soot and things like that you might get if you were at a bonfire or if you had a fire in your home and you get that kind of darkness, you get that inside the lungs as well in smokers, and especially in heavy smokers. So as I was saying here, you can see the ridges on the trachea. So these are the ridges, and those ridges are ridges of cartilage which helps hold that trachea open. So it's really important that our airway stays open so that the air can go in and out, because we don't have, if you think about the air all around you, it's not something that's quite solid or anything like that. So you need to be able to have those airways open so that air can pass really nice and easily down from the mouth and the nose, down that tube, without having to kind of push or be hindered in any way. So it's held open by those rings of cartilage which you can see along there. So that then goes down into each of the two lungs. So I just pull this one aside a little bit. You can see how, and I'll trim some of this away in a minute so we can get a better look at it. But as it reaches this sort of mid-level here, you get two branches, two bronchus. So those are our big branches. There's one on each side. It's a little bit clearer to see on this side. And that then branches down into each of the lungs and branches down smaller and smaller and smaller. And as it makes its way into the lungs, at the very end of each of those tubes, we have those alveoli, which is those little sacs. So again, I'll just pull some of this out of the way so that we can get down and we can see here where that's the bronchus there. So that's the branch there going into the lung on that side. And then there's a similar one then on the other side going into the other one. And what I'll also do is just take a slice through some of this lung tissue here so that we can have a look and see what it looks like on the inside. So I'm not sure how clearly, again, it shows up on the camera. I can try zooming in a little bit and just see if that actually makes it a little bit clearer. Just give it a second to focus. So you might be able to make out here, you can sort of see some little, almost looks a little bit like those little spots, and that's just showing where some of the alveoli are and where you can see them just at the ends. It's all covered by this membrane which holds all of our lungs into place. So I'm just going to cut through, gently through the membrane and gently through into the inside of the lung here. and you can see, so as I pull that back, hopefully we'll get it to focus, you can see some tubes. So these are some of the branches of those bronchioles, so they're getting gradually smaller and smaller as they go out towards the edges. So they branch down, and then you can see lots of little smooth little air sacs. Very, very small, and there's loads and loads of them in there. What you can also see here is spaces where there are blood vessels. So our lungs is the interface between our blood and the outside and the gases that we need to breathe in. So there's loads and loads and loads of blood vessels inside our lungs that go through all of those alveoli and are where that exchange takes place. We've got lots of little blood vessels that work all around those alveoli, and where that gas is exchanged, where the oxygen coming into the body and the carbon dioxide going out of the body, all takes place there in our lungs. And you can see how the tubes are there getting gradually smaller and smaller as we go through. I'll just cut down through this a little bit further so we can see a bit more. So we can see all of the different tubes and vessels. And again, this is a bronchial tube here, and you can feel, even in that one, you can feel the ridges of the cartilage that are there to hold it open. So you can tell the difference between the air tubes, if you like, within the lungs and the blood tubes within the lungs, because the air tubes are a little bit harder because they've got those bits of cartilage in to help them hold them open, whereas the blood tubes are much softer. And altogether, the lung tissue is very soft and it should be very soft and very movable. And again, so if you had someone who was a smoker, or someone who had a disorder within their lungs because of maybe they'd been working in an industry where they were breathing in toxins, or maybe they've had an illness, those lungs, the softness, they're not as soft, they're not as able to move around, and those alveoli, what happens is they actually start to break down and open up, and they're not as efficient and not as able to breathe in that oxygen and exchange the oxygen between those blood vessels. So you can see actually the inside of this lung, where there's still quite a bit of moisture, looks quite a bit healthier even than the outside, where it sort of dries out a little bit, where it's been exposed to the air outside. So that's our basic anatomy of our lungs and our heart. So I'll just put this back here again. So our heart would sit again within our chest cavity beside our lungs. So it would sit around here-ish, and that would allow zoom it back out again. That would allow the heart to sit there, and like I say, that's that much closer circuit between the heart and the lungs there. So, does anybody have any other questions for me at all? I'll give you a chance to type any in that you might have. And whilst you're doing that, I might try and see if I can get the pump to go back in again. It might not work quite so well now that I've cut it open, but what I could try and do is see if I can get it into just the one side and see if we can get this lung to pump up a bit better. So I'll just give you a second in case anyone does have any questions you'd like to ask. Pump back in here into this side. I'll just see if we can get it to pump up again while we're just we go. It's not quite so good, it's not quite getting such a good seal on it. But we can just get it to pump up on that side, and you can see it going in and out there. Thank you. Yeah, that's brilliant. So I'm glad everyone found that interesting. So that's the end of this session today. Hopefully you've enjoyed it, and I'm very happy that you were able to come along and join us to see this heart and lung dissection today.